Well, thank you and welcome to our global town hall meeting. I have a lot to cover today, so I want to go ahead and get started. On Monday, former U.S. Attorney Anton Valukas presented the findings from his investigation into our ignition switch recall. He shared those findings with the board of directors. As promised, we have also shared his report with the appropriate government officials. And this morning, I want to discuss it with you. I also want to update you on the company's commitment to create a compensation program for victims. But before I address the Valukas report, I want to first take an opportunity to again express my deepest sympathy to the families that lost loved ones and to those who were injured. I realize there are no words of mine that can ease their grief or their pain. But as I lead through this crisis, I want everyone to know I am guided by two clear principles. First, we will do the right thing for those who were harmed. And second, we'll accept responsibility for our mistakes and commit to doing everything within our power to make sure this never happens again. With respect to the Valukas report, you should know that he and his team had complete independence. The investigation covered more than 350 interviews with 230 individuals, and they reviewed more than 41 million documents. Mr. Valukas has confirmed that he and his investigators were provided unlimited access to interview any General Motors employee, and every request was granted. In addition, a number of former GM employees as well as third parties were part of the investigation. Today, I would like to share my perspective and announce some of the actions in response to the report. My understanding is NHTSA, our regulator, will post the report on their website, which will be available for anyone to review. I can tell you this report is extremely thorough, brutally tough, and deeply troubling. For those of us who have dedicated our lives to this company, it is enormously painful to see our shortcomings laid out so vividly. As I read the report, I was deeply saddened and disturbed. But this isn't about our feelings and it's not about our egos. This is about our responsibility to act with integrity, honor, and be committed to excellence. With all of our colleagues around the world watching, I want it known that this recall issue isn't merely an engineering or a manufacturing or a legal problem. It represents a fundamental failure to meet the basic needs of these customers. Our job is clear: to build high-quality, safe vehicles. In this case, with these vehicles, we simply didn't do our job. We failed these customers, and we must face up to it, and we must learn from it. To that end, and on behalf of GM, we pledge that we will use the findings and the recommendations from this report as a template to strengthen our company. What Valukas found in this situation was a pattern of incompetence and neglect. Repeatedly, individuals failed to disclose critical pieces of information that could have fundamentally changed the lives of those impacted by the faulty ignition switch. If this information had been disclosed, and I believe this in my heart, the company would have dealt with this situation much differently and appropriately. Furthermore, numerous individuals did not take the responsibility to drive the organization to understand what was truly happening. The report highlights a company that operated in silos, with a number of individuals seemingly looking for reasons to not act instead of finding ways to protect our customers. Let me be clear, this should have never happened. It is unacceptable. Our customers need to know that they can count on our cars, our trucks, and most importantly, our word. Because of the actions of a few people and the willingness of others to condone bureaucratic processes that avoided accountability, we let these customers down. To give you a sense of the thoroughness and forcefulness of the investigation, let me paraphrase a few key conclusions. 1, GM personnel's inability to address the ignition switch problem, which persisted for more than 11 years, represents a history of failures. While everyone who was engaged on the ignition switch issue had the responsibility to fix it, no one took responsibility. Through the entire 11-year history, there was no demonstrated sense of urgency right to the very end. The ignition switch issue was touched by numerous parties at GM, engineers, investigators, and lawyers, but no one raised the issues to the highest level of the company. Overall, the report concludes that from start to finish, the Cobalt saga was riddled with failure, which led to tragic results for many. I hate sharing this with you just as much as you hate hearing it, but I want you to hear it. And in fact, I want you to remember it. I want you to never forget it, because this is not just another business crisis for General Motors. We aren't simply going to fix this and move on. We are going to fix the failures in our system that I promise. In fact, many are already fixed. And we are going to do the right thing for the affected parties. But I never want to put this behind us. I want to keep this painful experience permanently in our collective memories. I don't want to forget what happened because I, and I know you, never want this to happen again. You should know that Mr. Valoukas' report revealed that there was no conspiracy by the corporation to cover up facts. In addition, the investigators found no evidence that any employee made a trade-off between safety and cost. The pattern in this case is much more complex and more nuanced. What Valoukas found was a pattern of management deficiencies and misjudgments, often based on incomplete data that were passed off at the time as business as usual. Unfortunately, the report found that these seemingly benign actions led to devastating consequences. In short, we misdiagnosed the problem from the very beginning. Experienced engineers with the responsibility for safety did not understand that the airbags would not deploy if the ignition switch changed into the off position. I know many of you are saying to yourselves that this problem isn't a fair reflection of the company as a whole. I know it, and I know you know it too. We are better than this, but we have to own this problem, and we have to have the courage to deal with it in the right way. As we have learned more about this situation over the last few months, we have acted aggressively to uncover facts, correct the problem, and restructure internal systems that allowed this problem to develop in the first place. I mentioned it earlier that we are posting a summary of all of our actions on the website, but I want to highlight 5 of the most critical steps we have already taken. First, we named Jeff Boyer Vice President of Safety for the company, elevating and integrating our safety processes under a single leader. Jeff reports directly to Mark Royce, and he and I meet on a regular basis. We've added 35 safety investigators that will allow us to identify and address issues much more quickly, and I think we're already seeing the positive results of their work. We've instituted the Speak Up for Safety program that encourages employees to report potential safety issues quickly, and we will recognize employees for doing so. We announced the creation of and have already implemented the new Global Product Integrity Organization. And this organization, I am confident, will enhance our overall safety and quality performance. And finally, and this is incredibly important, we restructured the safety decision-making process in the company to raise it to the highest levels. Senior management will be at the center of these issues as we move forward. The Valoukas report makes a series of recommendations in 8 major areas, and I'm committing the company that we will act on all of these recommendations. In each of the major areas, we've already taken steps, but there is much more to do. We will move forcefully to complete the recommendations on an expedited timetable. Evidence of our work is already apparent. As I'm sure you know, we are taking an aggressive approach on recalls. We are bringing greater rigor and discipline to our analysis and decision-making process regarding recalls and other potential safety-related matters. This is the new norm. We are redoubling our efforts, and I believe they will be substantially complete by the end of the second quarter. In the near term, you might expect to see a few more recall announcements. We have also made a number of personnel decisions. Some of these were tough calls. I'm sure you can appreciate this, and we held off making these until the investigation was complete. But with the facts before us, we felt it was important to make a number of changes, and we've already done so. 15 individuals who we determined to have acted inappropriately are no longer with the company. Some were removed because of what we consider misconduct or incompetence. Others have been relieved because they simply didn't do enough. They didn't take responsibility. They didn't act with a sense of urgency. Disciplinary actions have been taken also against 5 additional employees as part of the company. And with these moves, I feel we have addressed the personnel issues in this matter. Consistent with our priority to do the right thing for those that were harmed, we will be implementing a compensation program for those who lost loved ones who have suffered serious injuries as a result of the ignition switch failure. To that end, we have engaged Ken Feinberg to review options, and ultimately, he will administer the compensation program. Again, with all of the changes we have implemented and are now undertaking, the job of correcting our mistakes is only the beginning. Strengthening our systems and adding resources are critically important steps to improving our company. But as positive as these steps are, they still aren't enough. To excel, to truly build the best auto company for customers, we have to change our behaviors as well. We have to personalize this challenge. Quality and safety aren't someone else's responsibility. They're mine, they're yours. We must all feel a personal responsibility to see that this company excels at every level. Together, we have to understand that the attitudes and practices that allowed this failure to occur in the first place will not be tolerated. And if we think that cleaning up this problem and making a few process changes will be enough, we are badly mistaken. Our job is to not just fix the problem. Our job must be to set a new industry standard for safety, quality, and excellence. To settle for anything less would be a profound error. So if you are aware of a potential problem affecting safety or quality and you don't speak up, you're part of the problem, and that is not acceptable. If you see a problem that you don't believe it's being handled properly, elevate it to your supervisor. If you still don't believe it's being handled properly, contact me directly. I want an environment at GM where the customer is at the center of every action and decision we make. After all, we exist to serve their needs, not ours. We jointly own our successes and our failures, and we need to hold each other accountable. I know that every day, over 200,000 GM employees get up and go to work with a sincere commitment to do their very, very best. You and I both know that the vast majority of our colleagues care deeply about safety and quality and have the highest integrity. The simple truth is, each one of us has the power to make GM a better, more customer-focused company. It's time we unleash the full power of this great company. When I started at GM 33 years ago, I never expected to be CEO. And I certainly never expected to be in a situation like this. But I'm here, and you're here. And we have to be committed to leading in a way that brings honor and respect to this company. Even on a day as tough as this, I am proud and honored to work for General Motors. I know we have dedicated and talented team of employees that are loyal and honest. I know because of your efforts, our current vehicles are winning in the marketplace on safety, quality, and design. I know our dealers are proud to sell our vehicles, and they care deeply about providing excellent service to our customers. And I know suppliers work hard every day to provide the best components for our vehicles. And most important of all, I know, as do you, that our products enhance the lives of millions of people around the world every single day. As I prepared for today, I thought long and hard about this very difficult message. I knew full well it would be difficult for all of us, but I also knew the only course of action was to be direct and totally honest. This is a test of our character and our values. And in the end, I'm not afraid of the truth, and I know you aren't either. I want it known that we will face up to our mistakes and we will take them head on. The fact is, I believe in this company, and I believe in all of you. And I know you, with me, want GM to be the world's best automotive company for customers. Whatever it takes to do that is exactly what we will do. Thank you.
99% of you. How we're going to do it today is, if you could, just put your hand up. I'll call on you. We'll get you a microphone. Identify yourself, address the questions, and then we'll work through those. We'll take the time we need to answer your questions. You've all heard what Mary's comments were, so I don't think we're going to have any opening comments. So right now, we'll just start it off with questions. So, Jeff.
As far you mentioned the compensation fund. Any indication at this point how large that will be and who will be open to file claims in that compensation fund? Will it just be people who were injured or people who have owned the vehicles and have had degradation in their value?
Again, we're creating the compensation program because we think it's the right thing to do. We want everybody who has either lost a loved one or has suffered a serious injury to be part of the compensation program. Dan's been leading that effort. Dan, do you have anything to add?
Sure. Ken Feinberg will be the independent administrator of the program. The specific protocol and rules of the program are still under development by Ken Feinberg. He expects to bring that to conclusion in the coming weeks.
Any dollar number at this point?
Our objective is to do the right thing here and to go out and to compensate all of those people that should be compensated.
Okay.
Rod Maloney, WDIV-TV Detroit. Mary, I think the two questions that strike me most are, one, what was the environment that led to these kinds of attitudes? In other words, was it fear that the company might go under if there were a recall, or was it just an arrogant attitude, number one? The number two question is, how is it that does the company allow for a part change without changing the number, which, as I understand it, is sort of the cardinal sin of all of this, and what is it that the report today tells us about all of that?
Well, clearly, there were a number of safety recalls that occurred over this period, some fairly significant. I think if you look at the root of this issue, first off, you had a part that was released to go into production that didn't meet the performance requirements. And then, sadly, when the problems first occurred, they were misdiagnosed. They weren't deemed a safety issue because engineers didn't understand the relationship between the switch and the circuitry that deploys the airbag.
Excellent. Let's go across. Tom?
Mary, can you say how high in the company, of the people who were disciplined or fired, how high in the company did this go? And also, under the organizational chart, safety reported to you as product development chief for 3 years. Should you not have known about this?
I wish I had known, because the minute we knew, we took action. And I think you've seen swift action being taken since the end of January. As it relates across the organization to the number of individuals that are no longer with the company, they represent many functions: engineering, legal, public policy, quality. A disproportionate number of those that are no longer with the company were in senior roles or executive roles.
Yes, sir.
James Amos, WardsAuto.com. Just curious, Mary, how confident you are that that this is an isolated incident. The part change being made without the part number going along with it.
Again, and commented on that is not an acceptable process. It never has been. It isn't going forward. And so as we looked at this situation and we looked across the company, we feel, again, this was a tragic set of events of serious mistakes that were made over an extended period of time on this issue.
So why don't we go right here, CNN.
Right here. Hi, Poppy Harlow with CNN. Will GM waive the liability shield that it acquired as part of the taxpayer-funded bankruptcy in all cases of injury and death tied to the ignition switch defect?
The compensation program is directed specifically at this situation because we believe there was a unique series of mistakes that were made over an extended period of time, and that's what the compensation program is designed to address for those that were lost loved ones or were injured as a result.
Does that mean that GM is waiving its liability shield in those injury and death cases tied to the ignition switch defect? Is that what you're saying?
Again, I'm saying we're setting up this compensation program that we think is a very unique situation due to unique mistakes made over a long period of time.
Because if victims' families are not satisfied with what they are being given and want to take General Motors to
The-
Nothing you know at this time?
The program is voluntary, and, people have the ability to make their own decisions there.
So, Jeff?
Jeff Bennett, Wall Street Journal. Mary, I was wondering if you could go back to the end of 2005, 2006. One of the questions is, why was the switch changed by engineers, and who within that group knew about it? Is it from your findings that that switch change was just kept in the lower levels of the engineering department? And why was it changed in April 2006?
Again, the report indicates that there was a change made, that part number wasn't documented, and that, it was not communicated. And actually, you'll see there were times when it was directly asked, and there was no recollection of that being done.
Do you know why, though?
I can't speculate on why. Again, it's not part of the process. You do not change a part for fit, form, or function and not change the part number.
First, we're going to go to Phil, and then we'll move up here.
Mary Phil LeBeau with CNBC. Playing off of Jeff's question, the why seems to be what I think a lot of people are trying to figure out here. Saying it was incompetency and failure repeatedly, that somewhat explains it, but I think a lot of people are trying to understand what was the mindset for the individuals involved who were ultimately involved in this entire process, why they didn't say something when they should have said something.
I wish I knew the answer to that question, because, as I said, I believe in my heart, had we known, we would have dealt with this matter at the right period of time, and we wouldn't have had the tragic consequences. I can't speculate on that. I can tell you those individuals are no longer with the company.
And a disproportionate number were senior management,
Senior executives or higher.
senior executives, VP level or higher?
I would say executive or higher, going into some of the top levels.
Right here.
Mike Colias, Automotive News. Mary, I think you said in your comments that there were no trade-offs made between cost and safety, but I think there's been documentation that has shown that that was deliberated, in emails. And so how did you arrive at that conclusion?
So it's the conclusion of the Valukas report, because the problems were misdiagnosed from the very beginning, and they deemed it to be a customer satisfaction issue, not a safety issue. That is why, from my review, that there wasn't a trade-off made between safety and quality, and that was Mr. Valukas' finding as well.
Let's go over to Dave.
Dave Shepardson, Detroit News. A couple questions. First, to follow up on the compensation fund. So this will not apply simply to owners who have lost value in these cars as a result of the recall. Is that right?
Dan,
Yeah, what we're focused on here is to compensate those people that lost loved ones or suffered serious physical injuries as a result of the ignition switch defect.
And do you know now, why did GM agree to buy the parts initially that did not meet its own specifications?
Again, that was a decision made by an engineer that has led to tragic consequences.
So basically, was the fault here you had isolated individuals who did not do the right thing, and that people had opportunities to fix it, but that there was no broad conspiracy to prevent an expensive safety fix?
The Valukas report has that exact conclusion, that there was no conspiracy found and there was no employee that made a trade-off between safety and cost. That is the part of Valukas' findings.
Just last, and so that's because you're saying the emails that show the cost to improve the switch was 90 cents and you would only saved 10 or 15 cents in warranty costs. That was because it was a customer satisfaction, not a safety issue?
That's what's documented, yes.
Okay. Let's go to Bill Vlasic.
Bill Vlasic, New York Times. Mary, can you tell us exactly how many senior officials? You said a disproportionate number. Does that mean most of these 15 were senior executives? A small number? What was the exact?
I'm not going to comment specifically on the individuals, other than to confirm that the two individuals that were on leave are no longer part of the company. But I can tell you it's well over 50-60%.
Well over 50% are senior?
Yeah. Our executives are higher.
Our executives are higher. And this goes across a variety of departments. Can you specifically talk about your legal department and what how many people have lost their jobs there, and what changes you're going to make in that end of the company?
Again, I'm not going to cover specifics, but I can tell you that there were the right actions taken from a legal perspective in that function. I can tell you that there's already been very productive changes made. In fact, Mark, you may want to comment on the way that you interface with legal now in the engineering world.
Sure. The new organization, the Product Integrity Organization, along with the parts, components, and subsystems, are very much integrated with legal. And so the group of people that I lead, with Jeff Boyer running it, includes lead counsel for that, Lucy Doherty, who is in that as part of the decision-making activity. So these are big changes in the way it's constructed and the way it works.
All right, we're going to go back here first. One behind you.
Mary, hi, Jeff Glore, CBS News. You say 15 employees have been dismissed. How many employees in years past knew about this, and will any action be taken against them?
Again, we looked at the contents of the report, and senior leadership got together, reviewed it, and that's where we made the decision on the 15 as well as the 5 that also had disciplinary action taken. And we believe, as we look across, that the right actions have been taken.
Were there dozens more people?
Again, I think we've highlighted the individuals we thought needed to be addressed.
But did people leave in 2008 or 2009 who were intimately involved in this process?
Again, I think as you look at, you'll see in the report, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think, again, the actions that we take and cover the individuals that should be held accountable.
Right in front.
Robert Wright from the Financial Times. A couple of questions. It's well documented that you say that the company worked in silos, but it's well documented that the legal department had Ray DiGiorgio give evidence in a case last year where he said that he didn't know who'd redesigned the ignition switch. I mean, what can you say about the circumstances that led to that? And also, just very quickly, do you have any indication as to whether NHTSA is going to be, what they think of the report and whether they think it's a satisfactory account of what happened?
Again, though, the report was shared earlier this morning, so although I've spoken to both the Secretary of Transportation as well as key members of Congress, they haven't had a chance to review the report. We'll follow up if they have any other questions, and I can't speculate on what Mr. DiGiorgio said or was thinking.
Thanks. Todd Lasso with Automobile Magazine. Does the report investigate whether any other part numbers, any other parts were changed without the numbers being changed? I'm trying to get to the question of whether this was a unique one-time situation or whether you have any evidence that it happened beyond that one part.
Yeah, no, the report does not address other part number changes without part number fit, form, and function changes. So no, it does not.
And do you believe that it basically comes down to being a cover-up? Was it a cover-up by changing the part without changing the part number?
I do not believe that the report would reflect that. And I think you need to read that, Todd, first of all, which you will, I know. But the report reflects very simply, there was no part number change made.
So right here.
Ron Savage, Fox 2 Detroit. Mary, in your view, what's the federal responsibility or role given the approximately 2 years that the federal government was helping to guide the company?
None.
Joanne, you had one?
I did. Joanne Muller with Forbes. Mary, can you explain why the engineers wouldn't connect the switch problem with the airbag problem?
I wish I could. Because I think that obviously was a critical fact. It was misdiagnosed. I can't explain why they didn't, but they didn't.
It looks like the first key-off instances happened at the beginning of the press and launch of the car. At that time, engineers investigated that as a customer satisfaction activity, not linking or having the data around anything else that would lead them to believe that at the beginning of it. That obviously changed over time.
So if I don't know if I need the mic. But
yeah, you do.
So are you saying that the fact that your car shuts off is merely inconvenient and not necessarily a safety issue? Is that what they were judging it as?
I can't comment. I'm just giving you what the report listed. Obviously, that is not the case, as you know.
Does it have anything to do with sort of the transition to electronic ignitions?
I don't think so, Joanne.
Okay. It's just people looking at their little piece of work and not looking at the bigger picture?
Those are your words, not mine, but I think you need to read the report and come to your own conclusion on that, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Tim?
Hi, thank you. A couple questions about the employees who departed. Were they fired? Were they given buyout packages? Were they allowed to retire? Second of all, could you describe maybe which department had the most people depart? Is it legal? Is it engineering? And then
It was across those functions, and I would say, as the people, every situation you can imagine that is different, and we have laws, and some programs are guided by laws, and we, obviously held up our responsibility as it relates to employment law, and that was the basic facts that we made sure that we lived up to and no more.
so some were fired, and some were allowed to retire? Is that
Again, each one is an individual case, and I believe it's a matter of that individual employee and the company. I believe it's a private issue between the company and the employee.
Did engineering take the brunt of the folks leaving?
Again, I would say we looked, and you'll have the opportunity when you read the report. I think it was the right people across, and 4 different functions were represented.
And finally, when you read the report, what angered you the most?
There's not just one thing. I think what came to, I was deeply troubled, as I said, and I was very disturbed, but it really guided me to make sure we act and we make sure this never happens again, and we do the right thing for the people that were harmed because of this unique situation where mistakes were made over a long period of time.
There you go.
Hi, Melissa Burden from the Detroit News. I was wondering, in your investigation, did you find that any other recalls were treated like the ignition switch recall?
Again, the investigation was done by Anton Valukas and his team, and it was directed at the ignition switch.
Okay, so in this follow-up question then, can you explain as well if you've made any other executive moves other than the ones you have announced, like Jeff Boyer and Ken Morris? Have there been any other moves you've made?
Clearly there's been, I think, a lot of strengthening done in the product development department. Clearly there'll be moves made in other departments. Some have already been made.
And I would say that those are wide-ranging, and I'm not going to, we can't give you a complete list here today, but we certainly can, but this is very far-reaching.
Right here in front. To your
Hi,
left.
Rachel Abrams from the New York Times. Do you expect the number of fatalities, the 13 victims, to rise?
Sure. The 13 fatalities are those that we know of based on the information that we have available to us. We're not in a position to speculate how that number could change or what it might be. And what's much more important to us is that we go out and we find all of the people that suffered the loss of loved ones or serious physical injuries as a result of the ignition switch defect, and we capture those people in this compensation program.
Okay. Back over here. Can you wait for the other mic to help out everybody else and listen to what you're saying? Thank you.
Thank you, Poppy Harlow with CNN. Again, to follow up on her question, why is General Motors only counting frontal crashes where airbags did not deploy for its list of those 13 deaths? Why are people that are sitting in the back seat of a car not counted even if they died, and the person sitting in the front seat is?
So what we've done is we've analyzed all of the information we have available to us based on one specific definition, as you described.
Right.
We've counted 13 people. What's more important than the specific definition in relation to that number is what we're doing about it. And what we're doing is we're going out to do the right thing with respect to establishing this compensation program, and we want to go out and find all of the people that have suffered the loss of loved ones or serious physical injuries as a result of this defect and do the right thing by those people.
But is that doing the right thing to not count someone, say, sitting in the back seat or someone where there's a side impact crash? Or are you saying that that number may go up if you determine that those people died as a result of the ignition switch?
The rules and the eligibility criteria of the compensation program are being determined and set independently by Ken Feinberg.
Okay.
It will be his determination as to what the rules are, what the eligibility criteria are. He hasn't concluded that yet. We expect that to happen in the next few weeks.
So just so I'm clear, does that mean that perhaps your official 13 number won't go up, but Ken Feinberg may determine that there are more than 13 people that died as a result and then compensate them accordingly?
Yeah, Ken Feinberg will determine the eligibility criteria, and then the independent administrator, Ken Feinberg, will accept all claims that come in, and he will determine eligibility for compensation under the
But
program.
your official number, GM's official number will not change, because NHTSA has said they believe it's higher. So I'm wondering is this 13 number what it is?
Based on all the information we have right now, information where we have specific details, that's the number.
Thank you.
Tom?
Tom Krischer from Associated Press again. It seems like from the documents that you read that have been submitted to Congress, the main problem, the companies seem to view this as a customer satisfaction issue. Many of the documents say you can still steer the cars even though the power steering goes out once the ignition switch slips into the off or accessory position. So was that really kind of the crux of the difference between customer service and safety? It obviously was a much larger safety problem if you can't steer the car, if it's much harder to steer.
I think that for this specific issue, there were two root issues, and then Mark, I don't know if you want to comment. One, again, a part was released to go into production that didn't meet the performance requirements, and then two, people didn't understand the connection when that part didn't work as designed and its connection to other systems in the car, like the airbag.
So I guess the issue was, it seemed like the company believed that this really wasn't a safety issue for a long time, because many of the documents say you can still steer the car. Is that the crux?
And that's accurate of, I think, what you'll find when you read the Valukas report.
We'll find that was the belief. Thank you.
Mark, you okay? Let's go back to Jeff, and then we'll go right behind him.
Yeah, hi, Mary Barr on the back of the room. Jeff Gilbert from WWJ. As you've looked through, not so much this report, but looked through all of the other issues with GM cars, and you've had a number of recalls lately, are you satisfied that there's not another issue like this festering beneath the surface at this particular point?
Again, if we find something, we will deal with it. At this time, I don't think so. We've redoubled our efforts. I think the team, when you look at the additional investigators, we've actually have a project that's near completion where we're going to be using data analytics to make sure we're capturing information, whether it comes from internal, external sources, or from the legal team, so across the company, as well as internal and external sources, to make sure we're looking at issues quickly. I think you'll see in some of the recalls that we've recently announced, they're very small populations. Our goal is to make the decisions with our customer safety in the center of it.
And that's why you're making so many recalls now, essentially catching up on things that may have been on the fence before?
Well, every problem is different, right? And if there's a defect and it warrants a recall, we will recall the car. It's as simple as that. And that bar and that intensity and focus on the customer is what we're doing right now.
Thank you.
All right, so if we can come up here to Jeff Flock, and then we'll move back one at a time there, then we'll move across the aisle again.
Yeah, following up on that, I think, Mary, you said that you're changing the way recalls are handled. In other words, they're going to go farther up the chain than they used to. My understanding is that not only at General Motors, but at other car makers as well, the idea was to keep the recall decisions among a group that was most smartest about handling that, and not have it go to the executive level. How far up now will these decisions go, and how has the procedure changed from how it was before?
I'm the highest voting member.
So you'll be involved now?
I am involved right now. I've been involved all three of us have been.
Yeah, all three of us are involved.
Yeah.
And that was not the case, though, prior to your management?
Correct. And I would also say, though, I think an important point to be made, although, senior leadership will be in the middle of these, we will still want the technical resources led by Mark, and Jeff is the chairman of this group, or the leader of this group, but we still want the technical people making the right decisions that truly understand the issues, but there'll be transparency across the senior leadership.
And it stands to reason, though, you may be erring on the side. I mean, one of the reasons perhaps that it didn't rise to that level before was that again, you wanted the most experienced people making those decisions, and you as an executive perhaps would err on the side of caution, I would suspect. And is that one of the reasons we're seeing more of the recalls that we're seeing now?
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, those are good observations. But if you look at this and you look at the disconnect between, a safety issue and the ignition switch, and you look at the people that were involved, good people, hardworking people, but people that had been in that arena and maybe not have been in the total vehicle piece of this. So what we're looking at right now is how those defects, if we have one, affect the whole vehicle, very simply. And that is a very powerful piece of decision-making and experience that we're inducing here.
Go one behind.
Hi, Sonara Zaki, ABC News. I have a quick two-parter. One is, will you be making the names of the 13 victims public? Because people have sort of been guessing as to who exactly has been impacted by the ignition crisis.
No, we don't plan to do that.
Okay. And then do you have any comment on the Department of Justice or any sort of criminal, challenges, legal challenges that GM could potentially still face, and what you may be talking about with the Department of Justice right now? I don't know what you can say.
We are cooperating fully, and we've been doing that for several weeks, months, not only with the Department of Justice as well as the Congress and NHTSA, and we'll continue to do so. Beyond that, I can't speculate.
One behind again.
You mentioned that many of the senior executives, or many of the people that were terminated were on the senior level. Were they that rank at the time a decade ago when this all started to unfold?
In some cases there may have been changes, but for the most part, if memory serves it correct, they were relatively with similar level role.
Thank you.
We're going to go across the aisle here first and handle. Ben, did you still have your question, or was it answered?
Ben Kleeman with Reuters. I know you're not identifying the 15, but can you say if General Counsel Michael Milken is still employed by the company?
Yes, he is.
And are any of the 15, when you say senior?
I'm not going to comment any more than on the 15.
Okay.
Dave? Right here in front of you, and then we'll move back to you two, and then I'm going to come back to this side.
Two other questions. Can you give us an update on how many vehicles have been repaired and how many parts you produced, and if you still will meet the October deadline?
Yes, we're on track to do that. We've produced 200, as of last night, we've produced over 280,000 what we call kits, and over 113,000 repairs are complete.
And what other steps are you going to take to try to encourage owners who may not be coming in to get their vehicles repaired?
The dealers have done a fabulous job of working with the customers, supporting them. They're reaching out to them. We're communicating with them. They're, in many cases, working to try and make it as easy as possible for the customer to come in and get it switched. We'll continue to do that. We're also looking at unique ways of communicating, to reach out, to communicate the importance of getting the vehicle repaired.
And last summer, in July 2013, NHTSA sent an email to several GM executives saying the company was slow to act, slow to communicate, often used options other than recalls to fix cars. Did you look at that, or did the report look at this issue in terms of, did GM have a more systemic problem to avoiding recalls or trying to limit the number of vehicles recalled?
I have seen that report. I'm, as part of the 41 million documents that the Volucas team looked at, I'm confident they looked at that document as well. We are working cooperatively with NHTSA on a daily basis. We want to make sure we're very open and transparent in providing the data and discussing any items that we're looking at, and we'll continue to do that.
Let's go right there. Now I'm going to come across here.
Nathan Bowman from the Detroit Free Press. A couple weeks ago, Anthony Fox and David Friedman said at their press conference that had they received the data, they may have actually ordered a recall. Did Volucas cover whether GM provided enough data to NHTSA during the process?
The report looks into that, but again, if you look at the root cause and the fact that how this works through the system over a long period of time, I think that's probably the key finding that you'll see in the report.
So let's go across. Rod, then I'll come to Phil.
Rod Maloney again, Channel 4, Detroit. I want to get a clarification here because I heard you say that there was not a part number switch. In other words, a part number that was a part change without the number being recorded. I want to make sure that I heard that correctly, but more than that, I want to get into the issue of the part, the attempts to try and get that part redesigned, the company failing to or opting out of going with the redesign and then going with that redesign. Can you kind of walk us through that process as to where this was and where the failures were?
Okay. I think it's already been confirmed that there was not an official part change, and clearly fit, form, and function of the part was changed. I think you'll find that the report lays that out, and it's over a long period of time. I don't think I would do it justice because it's extensive as you go through the timeline.
Phil?
Mary, Phil LeBeau, CNBC. Can you tell us if the 15 individuals who were let go by the company, will they be receiving, or will GM be providing any legal counsel for them if they are brought to court by the DOJ, or are they completely on their own?
I don't know. I'd have to get back to you on that. I really don't know the answer to that question.
And then a follow-up question. I understand that you guys haven't designed the compensation fund yet, and you can't say who the 13 victims are. But there are going to be people who will see this, and you guys are saying it's still 13, and they're going to struggle with understanding why if someone dies in an accident that was caused by this defective ignition switch, whether or not they're sitting in the front seat or back seat shouldn't matter. What do you say to those people?
Well, I'll turn it over to Dan, but I want to be clear in what we're saying is we want the compensation program to reach everybody who either lost a loved one or was seriously injured as a result of the ignition switch. And we've hired Ken Feinberg as an independent administrator to do that. I don't know, Dan, if you have anything to add.
The only thing I'd add to that, as I said before, Feinberg will design the protocol and the rules of this program as an independent body, as an independent administrator. He will accept claims that come into the program and evaluate them independently and make a determination as to eligibility independently.
Okay, go back one, then I got to go back over here, and then I'll come back, Todd.
You say you're waiting for more information on some of these crashes before you revise the death toll. It would seem to me you have a huge amount of information about some of these cases. Brooke Melton's case in Georgia, in particular, the case that brought much of this to light. Why isn't her death counted?
Again, we can talk about measuring, we can speculate about what numbers might be. The most important action we can take right now is the action we've taken, which is to establish this compensation program for all of those that have lost loved ones, suffered serious physical injuries, have an independent administrator set the rules for eligibility for that program, determine the compensation amounts, and that's the action we've taken, and we expect that to be ready to begin accepting claims, as we said, by August 1st.
Do you now consider a car shutting off a safety issue?
In the case of the Cobalt, clearly in this case, when it was related to the ignition switch, it was.
Bill Vlasic, and then Mark will come to you.
Just a real quick follow-up about the 15 people. Did Mr. Valukas recommend these 15 people be separated from the company by name, or did you make that decision?
We as a senior leadership team made the determination.
Secondly, last fall when the Treasury Department sold its shares in General Motors, we heard a lot from your predecessor about how GM had changed and how it had a culture change and was going to make America proud. Some of those comments seem kind of hollow now, and I'm wondering, why should your customers believe that GM has changed now when we heard similar things just 6-7 months ago?
I think there's several points that you have to consider. First, there has been dramatic change at General Motors. Just look at the vehicles that we're putting on the road today that are award-winning based on external assessment across multiple brands in multiple segments. And there's a commitment to do great vehicles. There's a commitment to have a high safety culture, to have a high quality culture. But culture doesn't change overnight. But it's a continuum, and we're going to work to take it to the next level, because my commitment is, and I know Dan and Mark share it with me, we want to be the automobile company that puts the customer in the center and has the safest, highest quality vehicles. It's a journey, so I don't find those comments hollow.
Mark Phelan.
Thank you. Ms. Barra, Mark Phelan, Detroit Free Press. Couple of quick questions. The size of the compensation fund, will that be determined by Mr. Feinberg's recommendations or in some other fashion?
The ultimate number of people, the eligible claims that the independent administrator, Mr. Feinberg, determines. He will accept all claims, he will evaluate them, and he will make a determination.
So he will determine how much money General Motors ends up spending on this.
That's correct.
Thank you. Second, the root of this seems in many ways to be two failures in the system. A part was changed and the system was never notified of it, and the engineers who were evaluating a problem did not realize how severe the problem could be. Have the systems been changed in a way to make it less likely that any of that can happen again, or is it a matter of just telling people, do your jobs better?
No, the fundamental change in the systems, Mark, are really around things that we call, design for failure mode, and we do it across systems of cars. Our cars get more complex as time goes on, you know that. And so how a part or a subsystem interacts with the rest of the car is everything. The system that we put in place today with product integrity prevents that from ever happening again.
Okay, I was going to come back across, and then I'll go back to you. Todd, you were first, then Joanne. Jay?
Oh, thanks. Could you characterize the difference in culpability between the 15 people who have been separated from the company and the 5 people who have been disciplined? We haven't talked about the 5 who've been disciplined yet. What's the difference there?
As I said, for the 15, it was either somebody that we, deemed had either incompetent or misconduct versus others who simply didn't take action. I think it was important for others who maybe weren't in those categories, but still, had connection, that they understand and are very clear what their role is as an employee of General Motors.
So these 5 may have been people who knew of the problem but weren't directly involved with the engineering.
One level removed, I think, is a good way to look at it.
Okay, and just one other question. I know this is going to sound like ancient history, but visiting GM over the years, the kind of the remains of the results of the Nader era permeated the company, I think, up until very recently, and perhaps still do. But why did GM culture change or remain the same in reaction to that? Why didn't GM culture react to that the way you're reacting to it now?
Again, I can't speculate on that, but I can tell you, when I sit here with Dan and with Mark, since the moment we all started working together in the roles we were in even a few years back, we have been dedicated to doing great cars, trucks, and crossovers with the highest quality, safety being critical important of quality. And, I think we're demonstrating that what we're doing, that's what we're committed to, that's the culture we're driving. And I will tell you, the talented men and women at General Motors, that's what they want to do. They want to build great cars and trucks and crossovers. You just watched the teleconference or the global town hall that we just did. I mean, to look at the faces of our employees, they're more disappointed than I can think of anyone else because they want to do the right thing for the customer. They want to do great cars and trucks. They are, and trust me, they are internalizing this, and we will be a better company.
Joanne?
Joanne Muller from Forbes. From a shareholder perspective, how much more is this going to cost? Can you give us an update on second quarter charges for the full year? Does it depend on the outcome of the Feinberg compensation fund?
We've already made the you saw first quarter, we made the disclosure already for this quarter of $400 million for the recalls that we have announced to date. As I said in my remarks, as we redouble our efforts, we think to a large extent that will be substantially complete by the quarter, but I can't speculate on anything else right now.
Jeff, and then we'll go back forward.
Jeff Bennett, Wall Street Journal. One for Dan and then 2 for Mary. Dan, for those who opt out of going with Ken Feinberg and decide to go to court, will you use the bankruptcy protection process to fight those claims?
They'll preserve all of the same legal rights they have today. The program is entirely voluntary. If people opt out of the program, don't want to participate, they'll have the same legal rights they have today.
But will GM assert that those claims are barred because of the bankruptcy then?
They'll have the same legal rights they have today.
Okay. And then, Mary, I was wondering, the report, how far back did it go in administration? I know that it cleared you and your current administration, but did it look at Dan Ackerson, Rick Wagner? How far back did it go, and did it clear everybody in those administrations?
The report explicitly covered myself, Mark, and Mike Milliken. You'll see when you read it that others were interviewed, but I think Dan Ackerson has been very clear on his comments and his knowledge, which was not, he did not know, and I can't comment beyond that.
And just lastly, when will you return to Capitol Hill, and will Mr. Valukas accompany you to that?
That's their decision, not mine. So I have said that I'm willing to come back after the report is complete. Mr. Valukas has indicated if there's questions they'd like him to answer, he'll make himself available, but it's on their timetable.
Okay, thanks.
Jeff, right in front of you.
Poppy Harlow with CNN again. I want
Another microphone.
to touch on Jeff Glor's question from CBS and add to it. In terms of the number of victims at 13, Brooke Melton's father, Ken Melton, told me within the last week, quote, her death not being counted makes him feel like it doesn't count, like her life doesn't matter. So I think that from the perspective of some of the victims' families that we've talked to, that's where they're coming from. You're saying it seems like you're saying it doesn't matter if they're on the list. What matters is if they're compensated. And yes, that does matter. But to some of them, it matters to be counted on that list of 13. So I'm wondering, will the list of those that Mr. Feinberg counts, will that be public? Will that be the number on record going forward? Or will it always be 13 deaths tied to this ignition switch going forward?
Again, the 13 is based on what we know and the criteria that were defined around that. Again, the most important thing we can do right now is to reach out and find all of the people that have been impacted, lost loved ones, suffered serious physical injuries as a result of this ignition switch defect, and bring them in to this compensation program. It's so important. We went independently. We found the best person we possibly could to administer this program with Ken Feinberg. He's setting the rules for the program. He will determine the eligibility criteria. He will accept and process the claims and determine who should be compensated and how much they should be compensated.
And will that list be public, either the names or the numbers?
I can't tell you that at this point in time, but we very much want to respect the privacy of all the individuals involved here.
Thank you.
Melissa, and then we're going to come back up, and then we'll go back to town.
Hi, Melissa from the Detroit News again. Quick question and then a longer question. The quick question is, if you're one of the families that does want to go through your compensation program or Ken Feinberg's compensation program, how soon could you get paid? And then second, I'll let you answer that first and I'll.
So the objective, as we said in the press release, is to be in a position to begin, for Ken Feinberg to begin accepting claim information August 1st. Clearly, the objective is to be as expeditious as possible in meeting the needs of those people. But in terms of the specific timeline, the specific process, that's Ken Feinberg's job to determine that, and that's what he's in the process of finalizing.
Okay, so it would be hard to say at this point if it could be this year yet when someone could get compensated, or if it would be a longer process than that?
The goal is to move as quickly as possible.
Okay, the other question, I believe that you, Mary, that you said during your remarks that the Valukas report indicated 8 areas that you need to look at, or he suggested you look at. Can you tell us what areas those are? And then is there one area in particular where GM has, I guess, the most opportunity or the most work to do?
No, I mean, I think it's a wide-ranging set of recommendations. You'll see it's over 90 recommendations. And there are areas like addressing, eliminating silos, making sure we drive the right safety culture, making sure the structure is right from an organization perspective, making sure we have the right training, the right transparency, the right working relationship with legal. It's a number of areas that you'll have the opportunity to see.
Is there, with that though, is there any particular area, I guess, that he indicated or the report indicates that really GM, I guess, has the most opportunity to grow or to correct problems?
Again, I think he looked and made comprehensive recommendations. I don't think he necessarily prioritized those. I will tell you, I personally think, in addition to implementing every single recommendation, is to make sure we drive the right intent with every employee and empower them to make sure that they are supported as they raise safety issues, and we support them to do their very best work in designing and engineering great vehicles.
Okay, in the front.
Hi, Rachel Abrams again with the New York Times.
I understand you've made your commitment to the compensation fund and finding victims very clear, but some, if not all, of the 13 victims that you've already identified and have for a while, their families say they haven't heard anything from GM, and I'm just wondering why you've decided not to have contact with them yet.
Well, I did meet with some families when I was in Washington a few months back. And again, as we looked at this and looked at hiring Kenneth Feinberg, who is, as Dan said, is an expert in this area, to create this program, we're moving as fast as we can on that.
I go back to Tom, and then I've got to come back over to this side.
Tom Krischer from Associated Press. Given that you now believe that the loss of power steering when the engine shuts down, the loss of the power brakes is a safety problem, will you consider compensation of other types of accidents that were not frontal impact? In other words, if somebody lost the power steering, lost control of the car, and the side of the car hit a tree or something?
The eligibility criteria, as I said before, is getting determined by Ken Feinberg. So he will determine eligibility in relation to the ignition switch defect and how that contributed to the accident.
Is it possible then, if you do other impacts other than front, that the number of people who were killed could rise?
Again, Ken Feinberg is going to set the rules. He's going to accept the claims. He's going to determine eligibility.
Thank you.
I'm going to come back over here first. Start in the back with Jeff first.
You've known there was a problem with the switches for more than 11 years now. Continental told you that was linked to the airbags in 2009. Why didn't GM pick up on it then?
First of all, I didn't know, nor did either Dan or Mark know that until January 31st or later. But clearly, as you'll see in the report, pieces of information and clues didn't get put together. This is what I'm saying is there wasn't the intensity I would have liked to see with people looking to truly understand and solve an issue.
Is that the right person at GM not seeing the Continental reports, or what?
Again, I think when you have an opportunity to review the report, you'll see there's clues and data that had just pieces didn't get put together.
Right front. Nope. Phil, you're next.
Mary, a number of us have seen the documents, the emails from Capitol Hill showing that there were the program managers involved in the Cobalt knew about problems, and they were slow to act either with NHTSA or to flag these issues. Can you tell us if Jim or Lori Queen were dismissed or were they disciplined?
Again, I'm not commenting on any specific individuals other than the two people that we put on administrative leave are part of the 15 and no longer with the company.
So we got time for one, maybe two more. So come up to Mike and then Dave, and then we're done.
Mike Colias, Automotive News. Can you say whether there's been any new safeguards put in place that would prevent a single engineer from making a change? Because there were safeguards in the past, and those didn't seem to work.
Yeah, there is safeguards, and every one of these changes goes through a specifications analyst that will be paired up with the engineer to assure that when a part change is made by a supplier or by the engineer him or herself, that those are accurately documented and put into our system so that we can track it.
Dave?
And Mary, what was the failure of senior management here? Was it just that it did not establish a culture where problems like this rose to the top? And how much responsibility do you think senior management needs to take at GM for allowing these types of problems to go unnoticed at the top?
Again, during this period of time, there were many issues where we took quick action. When you look at the Volt and many others, as a company, I can assure you that not only myself but Mark and Dan, we have a demonstrated track record of once we're aware of an issue, addressing it, changing cultures, and fixing systems. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. That's what we're focused on doing, and we're well on our way.
Thank you very much, everybody. Be sure to grab.